Okay, so I just came up with this genius idea. What if we took the Avengers and made them younger? Not in like a Muppet Babies kind of way, but more in like a teens trying to make a name for themselves kind of way. Wait, they already did that? Okay, hold on, just give me a minute. One comic book later. Guys, I just finished reading this comic run and I need to know, why have they not made a Young Avengers movie yet? Seriously, what are we doing here? This would be perfect for where the MCU is at right now. Ever since Endgame, the Marvel Cinematic Universe has been in a transitional period. The old guard has stepped aside for the next generation to step up as a variety of new heroes have made their big screen debut. It's been a refreshing change of pace to see all these different stories being told as the universe expands its horizons into bold new territories. And while not every movie or show has been a hit, they've done a pretty good job at injecting a lot of fresh blood into the MCU with characters who can carry the franchise for the next generation to come. And I think that right now is the perfect time for Marvel to bring them all together and assemble the Young Avengers. And don't worry, I hear and see you from the inside of your walls as you wonder, why now? And there's a very simple answer for that. A few months back at San Diego Comic-Con, Marvel made the earth-shattering announcement that Kang Dynasty would now be Doomsday, due to some real-life legal problems, and by that I mean a man not being able to be a good person for more than 5 minutes. They decided to change course and pivot away from Kang the Conqueror to a very white Robert Downey Jr. playing Doctor Doom. While only time will tell if that's a good decision, I've been left wondering, how the hell are they going to wrap up the Kang storyline? Now, granted, Loki honestly did a pretty good job at putting things to rest for now, but that outcome feels less like a permanent solution and more so them putting a pin in things to circle back to down the line. Kang is still a very present threat in the MCU multiverse, and considering how they spent an entire show and movie setting him up, it would be a shame to waste those story threads. But here's the thing, it doesn't have to end like that. This is where the Young Avengers come in, as the team's foundation is directly tied to the controversial Conqueror himself. I think that introducing them is the perfect way to give that arc the closure it deserves, all while giving the MCU a new team that they absolutely need right now. And with all that being said, I think it's time we dive into who I think should be on the roster for this film. Up first, we have Kate Bishop, an obvious choice given the Marvel's ending scene basically doing everything in its power to tell us that they're setting this team up for the future. But what do you want me to do, not include her? Absolutely not, get lost. Besides that teaser, she is my favorite female superhero, so of course she's gonna make the lineup. Also, she's basically the de facto leader of the team in the comics, so it's pretty important to include her. Kate's journey in Hawkeye was all about finally becoming the hero she always dreamed of and learning how hard it truly is. As someone who's naturally talented in a multitude of ways, she was thrown into the deep end and learned on the fly with Clint on how to be a force for good. And while she has been making a difference out there, she's also kind of a girl failure. Don't get me wrong, it's what I love about her, but I think that being on this team is an opportunity for her to step up as a character. With Clint actually finally retired for once, third time's the charm, she doesn't have that support system to lean on anymore. I think it would be a great arc to see her step up as her own hero and one who is capable of leading others. She can do it in her own chaotic way, but it's important to establish here what makes her not only different from Clint, but as someone who's able to make tough decisions in stressful situations. It also does help that she comes from a wealthy family so she can fund the entire operation. But the thing they really need to do here is just define who Kate Bishop is outside of a Hawkeye fangirl and someone who's able to be a caring and fearless leader. Okay, you know, maybe not fearless, but at least competent. Next, the other obvious choice is Kamala Khan, the human embodiment of sunshine. Going off of that ending scene, it seems to me like she's going to be the one going around and assembling the team. Basically the Nick Fury of the group, but cooler. While she may make sense given where we left things off, Kamala is actually a really surprising choice to me because she was never on the team in the comics. Traditionally, she's part of another group called the Champions with people like Spider-Man and Nova. They're a group who didn't like how the Avengers operated and went to make their own team, so it's a pretty big change to include her here. At first, I wasn't the biggest fan of that idea and how they're seemingly merging together the Champions with the Young Avengers, but the more I've thought about it, the more I've actually come to like it. First of all, it'll be a while until we can actually get the Champions in the MCU, so this is a good spot for her to be in. Secondly, I think that with Kang as the villain, there's a really interesting way we can tie her into the story that would explain why she's here and make this change count. But we'll come back to that later. This is how I get you to stay and watch the video. Please, I'm so desperate. Also, they really don't need a reason to include Iman Vellani's Ms. Marvel. She's a national treasure, and I think the MCU would be much better if they put her in every single project. When it comes to her arc in the film, I think it's smart that we build off of her development in the Marvels. There, she learned how to work with a team through the highs and the lows. She's the only person in this group with actual experience there, and that should come in handy. But I also think that she should be in over her head. If she's going around to get the team together, she's gonna have to know what the problem is. And we'll get to that, but perhaps it's something that none of them are truly ready for. She can be way too ambitious in her actions, trying to create the Young Avengers to be just like her heroes, fighting these otherworldly threats, but in that she gets carried away with it. It's too much too soon for all of them, and it can be overwhelming, but despite everything, they'll persevere and push through it all because that's the right thing to do. Kamala's journey in the MCU thus far has been being this big superhero fangirl, and I think you want to carry over those themes here by trying to be just like her heroes and go out of her way to create this team so that she can feel like them and fit in with this group of other young characters. But we need to show that Kamala isn't exactly ready for that, and through the course of this movie, build her up as someone who is. And so what if they aren't ready? Someone needs to help people, and what's more heroic than that? But that's enough of the characters we already know are going to get involved. Let's talk about the most important person to this movie, Iron Lad. For the uninformed, he's not just British Iron Man as the name may suggest. Nathaniel is from the 30th century of Earth 6311 and a very significant figure in the multiverse. You see, he was a prodigy on this incredibly advanced Earth, gifted with genius-level intellect. One day, a bully is about to slit his throat in an alleyway. Jesus, that took a turn. But thankfully, he was saved. Unfortunately, though, the bad news is that his savior was none other than Kang the Conqueror, aka his future self. That's right, this Nathaniel is actually a young Nathaniel Richards, the eventual conqueror in the making. Right, so get this. Kang wasn't satisfied with his empire and had the bright idea to travel back in time and get his younger self to start on this mission sooner, thus altering the timeline and all that fun stuff. Only after learning who he was destined to become, it rightfully horrified Nathaniel, so he decided to do everything in his power to prevent that future from happening. He fled to Earth 616 and looked to get the Avengers' help, but they were disassembled at the time. Long story short, he found something called the Failsafe Protocol, which listed potential young heroes related to the Avengers who can step up when the time was needed, and thus went out of his way to form the Young Avengers and stop Kang. Now that you're finally caught up, I'm sure you can see why this works so well for the MCU. With Iron Lad being connected to both Kang and the Young Avengers Foundation, it's a no-brainer to adapt this story. It's a way to naturally bring that character back into the fold in a project that actually makes sense. And if the mainline Avengers films are just going to abandon him instead of finding a new actor to play the most recastable character of all time, then this is how you continue his arc. The timing works out perfectly too, as there is no active Avengers team in the MCU right now. Ever since Endgame, they've just kind of all been doing their own thing. When he comes over to this universe to find help, he's in for a rude awakening, I fear. One thing to note though that I think is interesting is that there are only like 4 people in the MCU right now who actually know how dangerous Kang can be. So if Iron Lad comes in with warnings of the end times, unless he's able to find one of those 4 people, nobody's gonna have any context for what it means. And you know what, there's something to that idea. Hold on, just give me a few seconds to figure this out. Alright, I got it, and it involves the next member of the team, Cassie Lang. Say what you will about Quantumania, it is far from perfect, but I actually think that Kathryn Newton is a great addition as a grown-up Cassie. She's the right energy for the character, and I really want to see more of her. The scene between Kate and Kamala also basically confirmed that she would appear in the movie, and that makes complete sense. Unlike a lot of these other characters, she's actually the daughter of a hero and would fit well into a team like this. Obviously, she's also a member of the team in the comics, so it really works out in every way, and if you disagree with me, you're a coward. Okay, that was mean, I'm sorry, but I do really think Cassie should have an important role in this movie. She has direct experience dealing with the Kang the Conqueror, and that is very valuable here. Cassie knows just how much of a problem he could be at full power more than anyone else, even Iron Lad himself. When it comes time to form the Young Avengers, she needs to use that knowledge to her advantage, especially since Kang is going to be the villain of the film. Cassie would be the voice of reason in the movie and someone who's trying to warn the others about how serious of a threat he is. While that idea may excite someone like Kamala, it scares Cassie. Also, I think it'd be interesting if you play into that dynamic between those two as they disagree on how to handle things. But despite thinking it's a bad idea, Cassie knows not to look the other way and goes along to try and offer help where she can despite how terrifying this is to her. The Ant Fam barely managed to beat him last time and he wasn't even at full power. Now that he's out there in the universe and rebuilding, he's gonna be a real problem and she knows that. But interestingly enough, the thing I want to focus on here is that Cassie also has a romance with Iron Lad in the comics. I think that right there should be the linchpin of this movie. Cassie falling in love with the man who is destined to try and ruin her life, someone who she knows firsthand is a monster, is a cruel twist of irony that would give us the juicy drama we all crave deep down. And maybe that love is so strong that future Kang starts to remember it and feel how much he cares about Cassie. That emotional attachment could lead to his downfall at the end of the film. He can't bring himself to hurt Cassie, and he hesitates, allowing the Young Avengers to apprehend him. Or not, I don't know man, this is just me spitballing here. But I do think that Cassie is in a very unique position as a character to tell some really interesting stories here. That brings us to our next candidate and a Young Avengers mainstay, Billy Kaplan, better known as Wiccan. Now as I'm writing this, Agatha All Along is still ongoing, so I can't say this for sure, but like, we all know that Joe Locke is playing Billy, right? It's the worst kept secret of all time at this point, and something that I'm just gonna use to benefit me for this movie. Hi, so I'm currently editing this video in the future, and with the release of Agatha Episode 5, we finally know his identity. Quick spoiler warning for those who don't want to know, because the show itself is doing an interesting job at hiding it. You can skip ahead to this timestamp here if you want to avoid all this talk. But it's been officially confirmed that Joe is indeed playing Billy, as we see him get his powers, headband, and Agatha mentions his connection to Wanda. That alone is great to know for the future of the MCU, but But I also had a running bit in this section of the video that is now completely ruined, so you can feel free to point and laugh at me every time I make that joke. Alright, back to the actual video. Whee! A fun thing about the team's first issue is that writer Alan Heinberg used it to create 5 new characters, which is genuinely really impressive considering how much staying power and impact they've had at Marvel. But one of those was Billy, someone who's already been given a lot of history in the comics. Alright, let's just get into it. You're gonna want to sit down for this one. Long story short, the Scarlet Witch has fake children, who are actually revealed to be part of Mephisto's soul, but then Billy's soul somehow gets reborn into the Kaplan family and is raised as one of their own. Also, his superhero name at first is Asgardian because he models himself on Thor to fit the Young Avengers branding, despite not even being remotely Asgardian. So then he just changes it to Wiccan. Alright, you take all the time you need to process it. I know Demon Babies is a lot to handle, but basically, in the comics, Billy is listed as a part of the Failsafe Protocol and thus recruited to join the team, which makes sense, right? It's only been a minute or so, believe it or not, so I still don't know how Agatha ends. Please stop asking me. Everybody point and laugh at this bozo. But I think it's safe to say that can be the case here, right? It's pretty straightforward, but it's an effective way to naturally rope him into the story. From there, I think Marvel should also introduce the new character of Teddy Altman, aka Hulkling, someone who surprisingly isn't a Hulk character, rather a Skrull-Kree hybrid destined to become Emperor and end their 1,000-year war. Listen, I understand committing to the branding, but in the case of Hulkling, can we please find him a new name? So many people are gonna get confused by that, guys. Come on. Even just calling him Emperor fits. But to get back to my point, you can't talk about Billy without mentioning Teddy. These two are practically an inseparable couple, and a hugely important one to Marvel's history. There have been many gay couples in comics before, but these two characters were specifically intended to be gay. No retconning or changes involved. It was a monumental moment to see for representation, and their popularity took off because of it. Since both of them are intrinsically tied to the team, it'd be wrong to have one without the other. And while I considered holding off until a potential sequel to introduce Teddy, it just didn't feel right to me. They need to bring these two together, and having them be a part of the protocol is an easy way to finally unite them and start developing that relationship. Unless, again, Agatha could make all of this impossible to happen. I cannot stress enough how I have not seen how that show ends yet, but please Marvel, do me a favor, don't make me look like a fool and just set Billy up to join the team. And that brings me to the final member of the team, Elijah Bradley. He was quietly introduced all the way back in Falcon and the Winter Soldier over 3 years ago. 3 years ago?! Oh, that's so fucked up. Oh god, I hate that. Well, regardless of my current crisis, Eli is someone who's been underutilized in the MCU thus far, but that's because we've been waiting to get to this moment. In the comics, he becomes the hero known as Patriot and is also listed on the Protocol. You get it, we're like 6 people deep at this point, they're all on the Protocol. As for his role in the team, Eli is the co-leader alongside Kate. They have a fun rapport as they compete against each other to try and be the best leader, but that also quickly develops into a romantic chemistry between the two. What's most interesting about Patriot, though, is that he doesn't have powers. You see, in the comics, Eli wasn't actually on the Protocol. That's right, I lied to you just a few seconds ago to create this dramatic reveal, and you ate it up. Here's what happened. Eli's uncle, Josiah X, was on the list, but he hadn't been contacted for years. Eli took advantage of this and lied to Iron Lad, saying that he had powers and he could help, as he's always wanted a chance to carry on his family's legacy. In order to be convincing, though, he started taking a drug called MGH, Mutant Growth Hormone, that gave him temporary abilities which he lied to the rest of the team about. It was a huge source of tension for the group and absolutely what should happen here. It makes him stand out from the rest and is an opportunity to tell a really powerful story about substance abuse. Listen, it's called the Young Avengers for a reason. We have to get some edutainment in there somewhere. We can see someone who is so desperate to help others that he's actively putting himself at risk and show him as this tragic figure. He does eventually get through it and get legit powers in the comics, and I think they can do that here too for a good wholesome ending, but including Patriot is a must. He's a really important part of this story and would add something unique that the others wouldn't. Also, I have no clue how long the actor is going to stay a kid, so they really need to act fast on including him in this stuff. Okay, you've been patient long enough, so let's just finally get to the actual story, pitch, and talk plot details. Here's how I think you set up the movie. Open with Kang escaping from the multiversal engine core he was shrunk down into in Quantum Mania. If Scott can find a way out, I'm sure that Kang can too. Just with a new face this time around, and we do not need to acknowledge it. While the TVA may think they've taken care of the Kang problem, they wrote this variant off and just said that Ant-Man dealt with it. He would be the very last version of him in the multiverse, giving him a clear shot at being the single victor at the end of time. I considered using a different version of Kang for this, but given his connection to Cassie, it would be much more thematically significant to bring him back. Also, I like the idea of playing into audience frustration with this version of the character. He should be upset, angered, and embarrassed by the fact that he lost to ants and use that as his motivation. It's a fun way to comment on how they handled the villain before this, and build off of that to show it was a fluke. There's still room to make him a genuine threat, but you can't ignore what's already happened. That failure would then inspire him to travel back in time and get ahead of things, thus creating Iron Lad. Ideally, this movie would take place this as an interquel between Doomsday and Secret Wars. While all the mainline heroes are off fighting White Doctor Doom, they leave their children behind to avoid the dangerous conflict ahead and stay safe at home. With a lot of these characters, they aren't ready for a huge event like this. Some of them haven't even put on a costume yet, but I want this movie to be what gets them ready for it. It'll teach them responsibility and give them the experience they need to be Avengers, but like, young. Someone should come up with a name for that. Anyways, with the Avengers gone, Iron Lad has nobody to turn to and decides to send a signal throughout the multiverse looking for anyone who can lend a hand. This warning would then be received by Kamala Khan and her quantum bands. It's been heavily teased and rumored for years now that her bangle and Shang-Chi's rings would be connected to Kang in some way, so I think we need to use that idea to link Kamala up with Iron Lad. Her bangle would be used to pull him to escape as he warns her that the Conqueror is coming. With the Avengers gone for who knows how long, Kamala turns to the sword tablet she stole and activates the failsafe protocol. From there, everything else is pretty straightforward. Kate and Kamala go around and assemble a group of remarkable young heroes to see if they can become something more. With Kang on his way to invade Earth 616 and finish the job to prove he isn't an embarrassment, they only have a limited amount of time to prepare for his invasion. Since he's the last Kang and already working with limited resources, I'd say he'd be a pretty fair villain for them to fight. Just don't give him laser beams that immediately disintegrate people. I am begging you. It is so hard to explain why he doesn't just, immediately atomize everyone he meets. Keep him relatively balanced and lean more into the adaptability aspect of the character. In their first fight, he should wipe the floor with them. Immediately set the tone for how dangerous he can be as he adapts on the fly and causes them to miscommunicate and accidentally hit each other. They can then escape to the quantum realm or something to regroup, but he really needs to hit them hard. As for the rest of it, listen, I'm not a writer. I don't know what to say for the rest of the movie. All I know is that it should end with them exploiting Kang's emotions and care for Cassie as a distraction before they all, kick him to death or something fun like that. And with a character like Kang, this realistically doesn't have to be the end of it, because you can just say another one made it through the cracks of the multiverse. But I doubt Marvel are eager to do more Kang stories in the future, so it's a way to have them deal with this character and finally give the story they've been setting up some kind of conclusion. Then by the end of the film, they've all learned their lessons and bonded to become an actual team before the universe is probably destroyed and turned into battle world, but that's a story for another time. Despite all the Kang stuff, the main focus of this movie should be establishing the Young Avengers as a cornerstone of the MCU. They've got some really interesting stories to adapt in the future, and I think it would make for a great trilogy. We could get a Children's Crusade sequel that brings the Scarlet Witch back into the MCU, and then conclude everything with the Family Matters story and do some fun stuff with the Kree-Skrull War. By that time, everyone would have aged out of their roles, so you can probably just introduce a new cast of colorful characters to take over. There are some heroes I purposely kept out who have a big role in the team, like Billy's brother Speed, Marvel Boy, and America Chavez. I think they should definitely appear in this hypothetical trilogy, but there just wasn't enough room to include them all in one film. I get the Kang stuff as the most interesting thing for a lot of people, but I really just want to see this team done well in live action. Besides the Fantastic Four, they might be my favorite superhero group. Ever since I read that first run a few years ago, yeah, I lied about only now reading it in the intro. What are you gonna do about it, huh? But since then, I have fallen in love with this group. They have such a unique energy to them that I haven't seen anywhere else in Marvel, and if done right, I think a lot of people would see how cool they really are. I've seen this incredibly disheartening sentiment floating around that the Young Avengers won't draw and Marvel shouldn't waste their time on them. Two ideas I am very strongly against. To those people, I say something will happen to you on December 17th at 1:19 p.m. And also that you need to give these characters a chance. People said the same thing about the Guardians of the Galaxy, and now look at them. They're household names because good movies bring in audiences. All it takes is a well thought out story with endearing characters and people will come to see it. And that's exactly what the Young Avengers are at their core. A group of inexperienced kids coming together to prove that they have what it takes to be heroes is compelling enough to me, but it's the characters themselves that really make it all worthwhile. From the human disaster that is Kate Bishop, to the ray of sunshine in a dark world that is Kamala Khan, to so many newcomers that I'd love to learn more about, the potential is already there for it. Adding Kang, a villain people are dying to see get resolved on top of it all, is an easy way to capture audience interest. It makes sense narratively, and is a natural way to assemble the next generation of Marvel's most important heroes. But I'm gonna go ahead and end things there. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed what I had to say, feel free to give the video a like, and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. If you have any different ideas on how to resolve the MCU Kang story or bring in the Young Avengers, please be sure to let me know. I would love to hear what everyone has to say, and continue the conversation down below. And if you want to see another video like this, you can click right over here. If you don't do it, that's gonna be my villain origin story. Please don't make me become a monster.